One of the most delightful teams to qualify in 1986 was Denmark, relative newcomers to world prominence. They'd eliminated England from the European Championship in 1983, and the following year fell only to France in the final of that competition. Denmark were a danger in Mexico. Of that, there was no doubt. The draw, however, did them no favours at all. Theirs was the quartet known as the Group of Death, so fierce was the competition. West Germany, always wonderful competitors in the World Cup, were now under the management of their 1974 winning captain, Franz Beckenbauer. Uruguay provided stern South American opposition. Scotland could hardly have had a tougher task. And they were the first to confront Denmark. Denmark brought fresh skill and enthusiasm to the World Cup. Their fans painted their faces in the national colours and sang happily about Danish dynamite. But in the Netzer Stadium, in one of the poor suburbs of Mexico City, it took almost an hour before the dynamite exploded. Preben Elkjær, Denmark's top scorer in the qualifiers with 8 goals, carried on where he had left off back in Europe the previous autumn. The Uruguayans approached their opening match confidently, knowing of problems within the German camp. Since finishing runners-up in the last World Cup, the West Germans had changed managers, but not all the players had welcomed Beckenbauer's appointment. Problems with the media and injury to skipper Karl-Heinz Rummenigge had further upset their plans. Uruguay duly went ahead through Antonio Alzamendi. Rummenigge, however, was not only fit enough to play against Uruguay, but fit enough to help set up the late West German equaliser for Klaus Allofs. Beckenbauer made only one change against the Scots in Querétaro, the attacking pace and skill of Pierre Littbarski, replacing the defensive strength of Andy Bremer. Scotland were under the guidance of Alec Ferguson, who was forced to make 4 changes. Yet it was Scotland who forced the pace and deserved to take the lead through Gordon Strachan. Strachan was in superb form, but only 5 minutes after his goal, West Germany hit back. Littbarski and Allofs were the providers, the reliable Rudi Völler, the man who knocked the ball into the net for the equaliser. Völler from Werder Bremen had missed most of the recent league season because of a thigh injury. Perhaps that was why he appeared fresher than most of his teammates or opponents. And it was Völler whose dogged pursuit of the ball laid on the match winner for Allofs. Denmark were about to lay on an exhibition of dynamic football which their fans would never forget. Football was as awesome as the sight from the Netzer Stadium, the snow-capped Mount Popocatépetl rising in the distance. Not since Holland introduced what became known as total football to the rest of the world in the early 70s, had one side staged such a refreshing exhibition of futuristic soccer. Elkjær scored a hat-trick. There was another thrilling first-half strike from midfielder Søren Lerby. Uruguay tried bravely to stem the inevitable tide despite the early expulsion of midfielder Miguel Bossio. Just before half-time, they narrowed the gap with a penalty from Enzo Francescoli. Denmark had reached the semi-finals of the European Championship 2 years earlier, their most successful international adventure. Their problem was that their domestic game had stayed amateur, while most other countries had turned professional. The Danes were in danger of being left behind. Now a marvellous new generation of players such as Michael Laudrup had emerged, plying their trade elsewhere in Europe. At the same time, in Sepp Piontek, the federation had found the right manager. The former German international fullback insisted everyone kept to the rules. Players who did not fly back for training or selection with the national team were ignored. So was anyone not playing first-team, first-division football in one country or another. The results, as this match showed in particular, were spectacular. How the Mexican fans, never mind the Danes, loved it. Nine minutes from the end, Jesper Olsen stepped into the game as substitute for the brilliant Laudrup. 2 minutes from time, Olsen it was who rounded off Denmark's 6-goal special. Both sides were already certain of a place in the second round. Denmark had not beaten the Germans for 56 years and consequently put out virtually a full-strength side. Beckenbauer, thinking of the humidity, the altitude and the challenges to come, rested defenders Augenthaler and Briegel and left attackers Littbarski and Rummenigge on the bench. In the second half, both Littbarski and Rummenigge were brought into the action, but by then it was too late. Denmark had established a 2-goal advantage through Jesper Olsen's penalty and then another goal for substitute John Eriksson. Victory left Denmark top of the group, but whether that was an advantage, considering the way the second round draw might work out, was open to doubt. Denmark dominated this very difficult group and were being hailed as potential champions. West Germany could afford that 2-0 defeat. They went through in second place, and so, oddly, did Uruguay with 2 points. Scotland should have been there instead, but in their final match they couldn't score against Uruguay, who were down to 10 men from the very first minute. Batista sent off. Morocco had been in Mexico before. They'd qualified in 1970 and hadn't been disgraced. Their progress since then reflected the growth of the game in Africa. In Morocco's case, that natural feel for a football, allied now to the experience of full-time professionalism in France for many of their squad. This was the group in which England were placed. They'd never met Morocco before, but they were much more familiar with their other opponents. Poland were semi-finalists in the World Cups of 1974 and 1982 and looked solid and reliable. But Portugal's plans were in disarray. They'd had no recent preparatory matches and the players were bickering over bonuses. The headquarters of the group, Monterrey, where Morocco had drawn 0-0 with Poland before England met Portugal. England made their debut with worries about the fitness of Brian Robson and emerged with deep concern about their entire defence.